and welcome to Two Tired Teachers.
Today we want to talk to you about Arches National Park.
And we have really enjoyed going there. There's several things we want to tell you before we actually get into some of the amazing scenery that's inside the park. The first is we split our visit to the park up into two sections. We did one the evening we got here, and we did the first half of that Scenic Drive. That Scenic Drive is 18 miles, if I'm not mistaken. It's 18 miles one way. And so
it's a lot to take in at one time.
And as you go into the park, there are going to be times. This morning when we left the park about 11:30, the park was closed because it was full. And so as we're going out, there was a roundabout, and they just had there was no one taking money as you came through the little booth because there's a roundabout and the road was blocked going into the park. Said it was full, come back in a couple hours.
And the information that they give you, if you look online, it will tell you there the best times to come are by 8 in the morning or after 3 in the afternoon.
And so the first day we got there, probably around 4. And went, and it's just stunning. First of all, as you go into the park, you're on a switchback road that just is going up, and then you go in, and it's like you've entered. Not that I've been to Egypt, but it looks like what I would think Egypt looks like. I mean, it just.
And that's something I wanted to bring up. They have names for some of the more famous arches and stuff. And one of them was Balanced Rock. It wasn't an arch. But as you go through, something Sharon and I did was talk about what the things looked like to us.
Kind of like you used to do as kids with clouds.
Yeah. One of the things we both saw were the Magi, the 3 wise men, just clear as day.
Yeah, so anyway, we made up our names for several of these as we went through. But for us, that was a great way to see the park. We went in that first, the first afternoon, and just, it's breathtaking. And there is just so much to see, and it changes as you're driving. I mean, it's 18 miles. And that's another thing is, this is the only national park I can remember being in. We haven't been to all of them. But the speed limit is 45 miles an hour because the drive is so far. Now, when you're near a popular hiking trail or destination, it slows down to 30 miles an hour because of the congestion.
Yes.
And
often they'll have rangers out when the parking in an area where you might want to stop and hike or do something is full, to tell you, you cannot park here. Go on.
Yeah, because, I mean, people making up their own parking spots. But there are, one of the things, another thing I want to mention is, if you can get out and do these strenuous hikes and go back and see some of those, that is awesome. And I do some of the shorter hikes, but just the Scenic Drives. If you can't do anything but the Scenic Drives, it is so worth it to visit these parks because it's just scenery you're not going to see other places.
In this park, I believe some of those extremely short hikes were ADA accessible.
Yeah, there were a couple where it's a viewpoint and you can
just out 100 feet or so,
100 yards, maybe, and back to see these things. But it was just spectacular, and I can understand why. I mean, this morning when we were doing yesterday afternoon, we did the first half. Then we went back this morning, and it was still extremely impressive. But we weren't just in awe of every single thing we were seeing. I mean, it was amazing. But went to do the second half. And at the end, the very end of the Scenic Drive, there's a big loop and there's some trails that head off of that and the campground. Yes. And we have a separate video about camping options in this area. but that was a zoo. I mean, they have parking on both sides. It's a one-way,
Yes.
that part is one-way loop, and people are taking it super slow because they want a parking spot.
Yes.
And
Or they're just stopping, and people are waving them off, and they're still stopped.
and a few people stopping to let people in or out or whatever, but you got to bring some patience when you're going to a more popular national
Yes.
park. But it is it's beautiful, and the visitor center, the gift shop was open. And what we have seen at Badlands,
Yes.
we've seen it at
Mount Rushmore.
Canyonlands, we saw it at Mount Rushmore, we've seen it here. The ranger information and planning your trip kind of stuff, they've moved outside.
Yes. And the exhibits that they have, the exception is the library at Rushmore. But the exhibits, they're hands-on for kids and big kids. They're closed.
Yeah, they've shut down a lot of that kind of stuff, but appreciate the efforts they've made to keep these things open and available
Yes.
for people to come and visit and see. But I really didn't know what to expect other than an
I had
arch.
seen, yeah.
And we saw a number of arches, obviously.
Yes.
And do you know the difference between an arch and a natural bridge?
Tell us, please.
Because we'd gone to Natural
Yes.
Bridges National Monument before we hit the Needles section of Canyonlands, and I was going to ask them. I'd read somewhere, and I thought I knew all bridges are arches, but not all arches are bridges.
Yes.
And they're both made with water, but it's how the water has created the structure. So with a natural bridge, the water has eroded underneath. So it's a point where the water has constantly hit and hit and hit and ultimately broken through and has made a bridge so that the water flows underneath it. With an arch, the water may have filtered down through and it freezes and then and it's constantly changing, and that part that's underneath that surface area has broken down, and possibly wind has
Yes.
helped to erode
Yes.
that away. And so there you go. I was curious to ask a ranger, and I don't know what questions he had been asked, but that's a good question.
And that is your science lesson for today.
And that's another thing I want to say is this whole area, I mean, not just in the national park, but seeing the tectonic plates just such a, jutting at such an angle, it's makes me want to get out of Moab. No, just kidding. But it is a beautiful area, and we have certainly enjoyed our stay here. And we hope you have enjoyed our look at Arches National Park. Thanks for watching
Two Tired Teachers.
Oh, one other thing. There is a bicycle trail
Oh, man.
that runs north of Moab. There are some bike paths off the main road through Moab, but there's this amazing bike path
That is paved.
that is paved. It's got the line down it, and it goes about 2.5 miles out that Highway 128. But a huge stretch of it just along the highway that goes up to 70. It crosses into the national park. We passed a number of people riding bikes
Yes.
in the national park. That's not something we were going to opt to do. There are no bike paths or trails in the national park.
And I don't think you're allowed to take a bike on a trail.
Not on a trail. And there's not a bike lane in the national park. And they say in their information the best trails and paths for bikes are out of the national
Yes.
park. And so we actually are going to show you part of that bike trail. We're looking forward to going and doing that in the morning. And so just want to mention that because we saw some people today on that switchback going up, and that just looked painful. And I can't imagine coming down it on a bike. I mean, but anyway, just wanted to throw that in there.